Proclus on Plato's Timaeus, and we're looking at the nature of the demiurge still. We'll just pick up right where we left off. But how are we to admit that the demiurge is the best of eternal natures? Now this, I mentioned at the end of the last time, seems confusing because he was saying that the paradigm that is Fanny's, the intelligible animal, ought to be the best of eternal natures. So, I'm not sure exactly what to make of that. But for some think that we must understand by this word best, the best of the causes of generated natures, in order that he may not be absolutely the best of causes, for this would be false, because there are gods higher than the demiurge, but that he may be the best of the causes of things that are generated, since the natures that are above him are not the causes of these. I, however, should be ashamed of myself, if I were in want of such an artifice as this, forgetting what was a little before said, in which the demiurge, now delivered to us by Plato, was shown to be the fountain and monad of every demiurgic order. On account of this, therefore, he is the best of causes, because he is allotted the first order among the demiurgi of the universe. Okay, so we have to read it in context. He's the best of causes because he's the chief of the demiurges, or the demiurgic powers. Plato here directly emulating Homer, who calls the demiurge the father of wholes and the supreme of rulers, and he thus denominates him, though he mentions the gods prior to him, as far as to the goddess Night, because therefore Jupiter is the most ancient and venerable of the demiurges. He is celebrated by Homer as the supreme of rulers, but by Plato as the best of causes. Others, however, by no means dare to accuse the demiurge, but blame this universe, and pervert the assertions of the ancients, who call it a cavern and den. And others, as Heraclitus, say that the demiurge sported in fabricating the world. Okay. To these objections, however, it is easy to reply. For though the world is, as Plato says, most beautiful and a blessed God, yet when compared with the intelligible, and the place which is there, it is deservedly called a cavern and a den. And it is especially so to partial souls who verge to bodies and matter. But with respect to the demiurge, though he is the best of causes, yet the whole of his providential energies about the recent fabrications may be called sport, when compared with the energies which are exempt from sensibles. So the world is most beautiful and was created sincerely, but with respect to, or when compared to, what else the demiurge is up to, it's sort of a plaything. For these reasons, therefore, the demiurge is thus celebrated in the present words by Plato. It is requisite also to understand how the coordination of the most beautiful with the most excellent is suspended from the first principles. For as in them, beauty is suspended from the good, so whatever was translated as the best of eternal natures, I feel like that was just a mistake, because he's only saying the best of causes, and then Proclus is further specifying it that he's the best of demiurgic principles, not the best of causes sensu lato. Okay. So it is requisite also to understand how the coordination of the most beautiful with the most excellent is suspended from the first principles. For as in them, beauty is suspended from the good, and the beautifying cause from the fountain of all good, thus also here the world is said to be most beautiful, but the demiurge most excellent, and the most beautiful is suspended from that which is best. In the next place, so beauty is suspended from goodness, demiurge is most good, the world is most beautiful, well, most good of causes, and then the world is as beautiful as it could be at the level of cosmic existence. The whole world is the most beautiful of bodily natures, and the most beautiful is suspended from that which is best. In the next place, it is requisite to understand how what is said about the fabrication itself of things imitates this fabrication. For as the world itself was led from confusion to order, and a similitude to the intelligible by fabrication, thus also the discussion of it first employed abhorrent appellations, calling it generated and destructible, but now the most venerable names, denominating it the best of generated natures, the offspring of the most excellent Father, and the image of the most divine paradigm. And shortly after, he reminds us of it by the most sacred of names. So the way that Timaeus in the dialogue goes from less noble to more noble names in describing the universe mirrors the way that the demiurge brought generation from a disordered to an orderly state. Next lemma. But again, these things thus subsisting, there is every necessity that the world should be the image of a certain thing. Proclus. To those who are more simple, what is here said may appear to be the same with what was before asserted. For someone who does not survey things accurately may ask what difference there is between saying that the world was fabricated according to a paradigm and that it is the image of a certain thing. In reality, however, each of these is separated from the other. So we're dealing with two distinct notions. I'll admit it does not seem evident to me what that would be yet. Being an image of a certain thing versus being fabricated according to a paradigm. I guess one emphasizes the way in which it is brought about to be fabricated by or according to a paradigm, and the other is about its essence. So it is the image of a thing. It is fabricated in the image. It is fabricated versus it is the image. So it's maybe that's the distinction, like how it comes about versus what it essentially is. For since it is possible for an artificer to make conformably to a paradigm, but the thing fabricated may not become the image of the paradigm in consequence of not being vanquished by the fabricating cause. Okay, so you can be made in the image of a paradigm, you can be made according to or conformably to a paradigm, or you're intended to be made by an artificer in accordance with the paradigm, but you don't necessarily become an image of that paradigm unless it's done well. So, in order that you may not fancy that this is also the case with the world, Plato has shown that the demiurge indeed looked to a paradigm, and that being most excellent, he looked to the most divine paradigm, from what he said respecting the universe being fabricated conformably to the intelligible, but that the universe also is vanquished by form and truly imitates its paradigm, he manifests from what is now said. For if the world is an image, the universe is assimilated to the intelligible. For that which is not dissimilar, but similar and consentaneous is an image. And I'm going to get a definition of consentaneous. Expressing agreement, like consent. Okay, so it's agreeable. You have, therefore, the sensible universe, the most beautiful of images, the intellectual universe, the best of causes, and the intelligible universe, the most divine of paradigms. Okay, image, cause, and paradigm. Each of these also is everywhere, for the sensible universe participates of intellect and being, so each is in each according to each. The sensible will participate of intellect and the intelligible. The intelligible will causally contain intellect and the sensible, and then intellect will participate of the intelligible and causally contain the sensible. But let's get Proclus to express it here. For the sensible universe participates of intellect and being. The intellectual universe possesses sensibles uniformly, so causally contains them. but intelligibles secondarily by participation. And the intelligible universe antecedently comprehends primordially and unitedly intellectuals and sensibles. So it causally contains, antecedently comprehends primordially and unitedly intellectuals and sensibles. The universe, however, subsists appropriately in each order. And the sensible universe, indeed, okay. So this is just reminding me of an exchange I was having on X recently about the universe versus the multiverse, and I was like, well, there is only one like true universe at the deepest level, but it is not divided according to a Cartesian coordinate system like the world around us seems to be. And in that sense, there can be many coordinate systems, but still one underlying universe. So there is the one universe, the intelligible universe, the intellectual universe, which is the demiurge, and then the sensible universe. I wonder if, because I was putting together the idea that souls measure space and time, I wonder if there'll be any indication that we could, like, justify multiple planes of spatial extension from Proclus's conception of the one sensible universe. But probably not. I doubt he kind of anticipated that. Although, interestingly, it is implicated or entailed, I think, from what he says in the Elements of Theology about souls and their relation to space and time. But that's just an aside. So the universe, however, subsists appropriately in each order, and the sensible universe, indeed, is placed before us as a fabrication. But the eternal is twofold, the one being as demiurgic, but the other as paradigmatic, though the paradigmatic is also in the demiurgic. For the demiurge makes looking to himself, since every intellect sees itself and is the same with the intelligible it contains, although it contains the intelligible intellectually. And again, the demiurgic is in the paradigmatic, since it makes that which is generated. For it is not a paradigm like a form impressed in wax. So the paradigm isn't the paradigm like a form that you push into wax, nor is the image of Socrates is the image of another image. But the paradigmatic cause, by its very being, makes secondary natures similar to itself. Yeah. So the paradigmatic causally contains the demiurgic. It makes the intelligible makes the intellectual by its very being. At the same time, however, to fabricate paradigmatically and to be a paradigm demiurgically, i.e. fabricatively, differ. Right. So to be the way in which the paradigm makes and the way in which the ideal maker is a paradigm are different. For the former, to fabricate in the way that a paradigm fabricates is to energize essentially. Okay, so it is to, and he says this elsewhere, intelligibles, their essence and their energy is non-different. Whereas other things have separate or separable essence and energy. So the paradigm does, it's not that it's without energy, it's just that its essence is its energy. So it energizes essentially through the whole of its essence, eternally always the same. But the latter, so the way in which the demiurge is a paradigm, is to impart essence energetically. Okay, so it is through the act of the demiurge where the demiurge can have a separable essence and energy because it's one of the lowest members of the second hypostasis. All souls have separable essences and energies. I think most forms have do not have separable essences and energies, or maybe just the intellectual level separates its essence from its energy. Both will be eternal, but I guess insofar as the demiurge is conjoined to the temporal, it can energize at the level of soul, at least insofar as it's conjoined, where demiurge creates soul, and that act of creating a temporal nature gives it something of the nature of temporal things, although causally containing temporal natures, not having it essentially. And so the way in which the demiurge energizes, although it energizes eternally, it's it's somewhat different from the nature of its essence. The demiurge has an essence which is impartible, eternal, atemporal, but its energy, because it creates temporal nature, is bound up with the nature of time to some degree. So that's the paradigm energizes essentially. It emanates from its essence in accord with its essence in order to generate the demiurge and other eternal natures. But the demiurge gives rise to essence through its energizing. It gives rise to, not that, so it's also true that the uh, intelligible animal, or intelligibles generally, will impart essence. They also impart essence, and they do so energetically. But when they do so energetically, they also do that through their essence. Their essence is that which energizes directly, and so the intelligibles will impart essence through energizing essentially, whereas the demiurge and intellectual natures will impart essence by energizing in a way that's slightly different from their essences, because there is a slight distinction between the essence and energy of the intellectuals. I would say that's my interpretation. For the former is to energize essentially, but the latter is to impart essence energetically, and the former is to perceive intellectually, intelligibly, but the latter is to be intelligible intellectually. So the way in which the paradigm makes is to have the intellectual nature according to the manner of intelligibles, and then the way in which the demiurge, the paradigm, is to be intelligible, to be an archetype intellectually. So what's unique about the intellectual nature there is that its energy will differ in some regard. Again, that's my interpretation. Its energy will differ in some regard because it's conjoined to temporal natures more so than the energy of intelligibles is. And so it is to be intelligible according to the manner of intellect. So, like the energy of intellect creates the essence of soul. So it is intelligible. It fills the role of a paradigm according to its energy, which is distinct from its essence in a way that the intelligibles have a non-distinct essence and energy. Okay. For the peculiarity of the paradigm is to make by its very being, by its essence, which is non-different from its energy, but of the demiurge to make by energizing, because its energy is different from its essence in some respect, although both are eternal. For it is not the same thing to make by existing and to know and energize through knowledge, since soul also produces life by existing, but makes artificially through knowledge. So we know the distinction between essence and energy in intellect by analogy to our knowledge of the distinction between what soul essentially produces, which is the life of the living body, and what it does through its energy, which is its dianoetic, activity. And it possesses indeed, I think the soul, and it possesses indeed the former life essentially, but the latter knowledge according to energy. And why is it requisite to lengthen these observations philosophically? For the theologist, long before, celebrates the demiurgic cause in Phanes. So the theologians being the Chaldean oracles, the author of the Chaldean oracles, will say that Phanes causally contains the demiurgic principle, although probably not using that philosophical language. He just says that Phanes, already the intelligible animal, is the demiurgic cause or has the demiurgic cause in some way. So again, it's not that that is the demiurge, it's that Phanes, being the intelligible, causally contains the principle of the intellectual. For there, as he says, the great Bromius, or all-seeing Jupiter, was and antecedently existed. Zeus was causally contained in Phanes, in order that he might have, as it were, the fountains of the twofold fabrication of things. Okay, so that Phanes might have the source or fount of both the paradigmatic and demiurgic cause of things. He also celebrates the paradigmatic cause in Jupiter. So likewise, the way in which the demiurge, by participation, has the demiurgic, by participation has the paradigmatic nature. For again, he likewise is, as he says, metis, the first generator, and much pleasing love. He also continually denominates by him Dionysius, and Phanes, and Ericapius. I'll look up Ericapius. In Orphic literature, so maybe we're dealing with the Orphic system, not the Chaldean system. That's my bad. Okay. In Orphic literature, Ericapios, power, literally power, was a title for the god Phanes, mentioned in Orphic poetry and the associated Dionysian mysteries, a non-Greek name for which no certain interpretation has been found. I'm going to go ahead and just read the whole, it's 3 short paragraphs on Wikipedia. Scholars have long been perplexed by the name Ericapios, and naturally most of them have attempted to derive it from Greek etymology. However, this seems questionable linguistically. The name has also been thought to have Hebrew origins because of its resemblance to Eric Apayim. All right. It has been argued even in antiquity that the name Ericapeos was an Oriental import. Thus, John Malalas, the 6th century Antiochian from Antioch historian, derives the name from the language spoken in his region. The name is first mentioned with certainty in the Orphic papyrus from Garab, a Dionysian mysteries text of the late 3rd century BC. The mythographer Otto Gruppa suggested that the Phanes myth appeared in its original form in Babylonia. Thence it spread over the Near East and took root particularly in Syria and Asia Minor. The gods of Babylon themselves were not imported, but the myth was attached to the local deities of the districts to which it spread. Ericapeos became important in various Neoplatonic writings of the so-called rhapsodic theogony, now lost. It was composed in the Hellenistic period, incorporating earlier works. It is known through summaries in later Neoplatonist authors. Okay. So there you go. He is also continually denominated by him. Zeus is denominated Dionysius, Phanes, and Ericapius. Well, Ericapius is a epithet of Phanes. So the Orphic mysteries authors, I guess Orpheus probably is actually who he's referring to by the theologist. So Orpheus describes Zeus as Phanes according to participation, and he describes him as Dionysius by way of causal containment, because of course Zeus is the principle of the father of Dionysus, and is the offspring of Phanes at some degree of removal. All the causes, therefore, participate of each other and are in each other, so that he who says, as the divine Iamblichus, that the demiurge comprehends in himself the paradigm, and he who evinces, as the illustrious Emilius, that the paradigm is the demiurge, in a certain respect, speak rightly. For the latter saw the demiurgic peculiarity pre-existing in the paradigm, for there the first Zeus exists, and on this account he makes Phanes to be the demiurge, but the former saw the paradigm in the demiurge. So Iamblichus, when he says that the demiurge is the paradigm, and Emilius, when he says that the intelligible animal is, or Phanes is the demiurge, they both speak rightly, because in a certain respect, those are both true, but it's not the authentic existence of the demiurge. All right, for Metis also was in the demiurge, being absorbed by him, and on this account he considered the paradigmatic to be the same with the demiurgic cause, and thus much concerning these particulars. And Metis, I think, have we looked at him before? Greek mythology. Oh, her. So Metis was the first wife of Zeus, goddess of wisdom, skill, or craft. Okay. So in a similar way, Zeus contains Metis. We'll read the Wikipedia on Metis. She's the goddess of wisdom in Greek mythology. She is one of the Titans and is the daughter of Ocean and Tethys. She was the mother of Athena by Zeus. There is also a moon named after Metis. When she was inside Zeus, Metis made a helmet and robe for her baby. The hammering, yeah, this is kind of vaguely familiar now. The hammering noise caused Zeus to have a headache. To try to help Zeus with the pain, Prometheus, Hephaestus, Hermes, or Palaemon, depending on the myth, cut his head open with a Minoan axe. Athena then came out of Zeus's head. She was fully grown and had her armor on. Okay, so Ben, for Proclus here, Metis was also in the demiurge. He's just comparing. It makes sense to talk about the demiurge being some other deity, because the way in which the demiurge either participates of the nature of another deity or causally contains the nature of another deity. Because all is in all, but appropriately to each. We ought not, however, to wonder if Plato calls the world an image, for though it is most beautiful, yet it is the image of intelligible beauty. Through this similitude also, it exhibits such things as adorn and beautify generation, and receives as a whole the form of the paradigm. Thus the philosopher calls the world the image of the intelligible as being assimilated to its paradigm. The addition, likewise, of necessity shows that the similitude of the former to the latter is admirable and ineffable. Necessity. So was that in the lemma? Yeah. But again, these things thus subsisting, there is every necessity that the world should be the image of a certain thing. Okay, so the addition likewise of a necessity shows that the similitude of the former to the latter is admirable and ineffable. Afterwards, also, he testifies this by a demonstration indubitable and firm, for it proceeds from the hypotheses themselves. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get into the next lemma. It's short. So, but in everything, to begin from a principle according to nature is the greatest of undertakings. Okay. in everything, to begin from a principle according to nature is the greatest of undertakings. So, making the universe according to a certain paradigm or principle is in accord with the rest of our experience, in which doing something great involves beginning from a proper principle, I suppose. Proclus. Some read what is here said by stopping at the word pantos, everything, according to whom the words indicate that it is the greatest of all things to make that beginning of the discussion, which is according to nature. But others, stopping at the word megiston, greatest, conjoin the word pantos with what follows, so that with them the colon signifies that it is the greatest undertaking to begin the discussion of the universe from a principle which is according to nature. Others, again, say that these words are introduced for the sake of the things previously assumed, these being rightly concluded through the hypotheses which were necessary. But according to others, they are introduced for the sake of what is directly after asserted, it being requisite, if we intend to make a proper beginning, to define previously what kind of discourses ought to be adopted concerning sensibles. And others say they are introduced for the sake of what will afterwards be delivered concerning the final cause. For this is the greatest principle, and according to nature. So the final cause is the superior type of cause of all. It's the greatest principle, and according to nature, which is requisite especially to survey, and from which, commencing, it is fit to discuss what follows. But that previous to disquisition of this, he informs us what the mode will be of physical discussions. To me, however, this axiom appears to be rightly asserted of all things, for it is universal and is adapted to what has been before said, to what immediately follows, and to what will be again said. Or rather, it is not adapted to these alone, but to all fabrication. For beginning from a principle according to nature, as from a root, Plato delivers afterwards explanations of cause homologous to this principle. That's kind of how I took the lemma as well. That, well, I said specifically that there's an analogy between the demiurgic creation and what is good across the board, which is to create or begin a big thing with its appropriate principle. And Proclus is saying, yeah, it's a general truth, and it applies to what preceded and what will follow. So it is not adapted to these alone, but to all fabrication. For beginning from a principle according to nature as from a root, Plato delivers afterwards explanations of cause homologous to this principle. And science itself, from proper hypotheses, collects appropriate conclusions. Science, therefore, follows the order of things, but doctrinal disquisition follows science. And this is the greatest undertaking. Doctrinal disquisition is the greatest undertaking, or what? Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I guess like the process of learning in general is the greatest undertaking. That is a little bit ambiguous here. In the first place, because it imitates wholes and the progression of beings. In the next place, because if the smallest particular is overlooked in the principle, it becomes multiplied as we proceed. And in the third place, the principle or beginning is said to be the half of the whole. If, however, this be the case, it possesses the greatest power. If, too, as some say, the principle is something more than the whole, it is in an admirable manner said to be the greatest thing. So still, the greatest undertaking is to begin from a proper principle. So he gives just the illustration, I think, of the sciences, that it starts from its first principle hypothesis, and then doctrinal disquisitions begin from scientific conclusions, So just the orderly progression of learning or any endeavor from first principles is the greatest undertaking. So if too, as some say, the principle is something more than the whole, it is in an admirable manner said to be the greatest thing. The truth of this is also testified by poets who say, quote, that everything which receives a good beginning usually ends well. And I wish we had a footnote. Which poets those are. And moreover, on this account, the Athenian stranger, calls the principle a god, if it obtains that which is fit. For he says, quote, from, I kind of guess, let's read the quote and then I'll guess. Principle being established in men as a god produces all things rightly if it obtains a congruous portion, or the part which is adapted to it. So I assume that's when he's explaining the dialectical method in, let's just say, the Sophist. That's where he has his first appearance. Isn't it? Or does he show up in the Theaetetus? No, I think he's there in the Theaetetus. So it could be Theaetetus, Sophist, or Statesman. Or I guess technically, well, it's one of those dialogues anyway. But what is the meaning of, is that the character's name in the laws too? The Athenian stranger? Characters in the laws. Plato. An unnamed Athenian. Yeah, so I guess it could be the same person in the laws. So this quote could belong to any of those 4 dialogues. But what is the meaning of the words according to nature? Is it the receiving everything which ought to be received, or is it that which first proceeds from things which subsist essentially? Okay. So the quote from the poets that everything which has a good beginning usually ends well, is probably attributed to Hesiod. He emphasizes the importance of a good beginning in his works, particularly in Works and Days. Okay. So that's probably Hesiod. But what is the meaning of the words according to nature? Is it the receiving everything which ought to be received, or is it that which first proceeds from things which subsist essentially? So again, in the lemma, but in everything to begin from a principle according to nature is the greatest of undertakings. So to begin from a principle according to nature. And so according to nature, does that mean receiving everything that ought to be received? Or is it that which first proceeds from things which subsist essentially? That's kind of confusing, but in everything, to begin from a principle according to nature, so to receive into the beginning everything that is proper to it, or to begin from a principle to stem forth from eternals appropriately. I don't know that there's even that much of a distinction between those two senses necessarily. For that which is last is a principle as with reference to us, but not with reference to nature. The principle, therefore, according to nature of the universe, indeed, is the final cause, but of demonstrations, the hypotheses, and of discussions, the definition respecting the form of the doctrine, whether it is to be received as firm, immutable, and accurate, or as that which is merely probable, and not indeed truth, but credible and assimilated to truth. Okay, this is a difficult paragraph. Okay, so a principle according to nature. He draws this distinction between a principle according to nature and a principle according to ourselves. And, for Aristotle, we begin epistemologically from senses and work up to intelligible contents, whereas according to nature, the intelligible contents are first. So he asks, is it the receiving of everything which ought to be received? That's principle according to us, I think. Or is it that which first proceeds from things which subsist essentially? That's the principle according to nature, I think. For that which is last is a principle as with reference to us, but not with reference to nature. Yeah, so sensibles are a principle to us. And then, so that which receives everything which ought to be received, so the most material, is the principle according to nature, like what is a principle with us epistemologically, which is to begin from the bottom, the most material, and work up, or is to begin according to nature from a principle, to begin from the essential, eternal things, as is the case with nature. The principle, therefore, according to nature of the universe, indeed, is the final cause. The final cause, the purpose of the universe, the good behind the universe, is the seed and source of it. But of demonstrations, the hypotheses, and of discussions, the principle is the definition, respecting the form of the doctrine. So first we have to define our terms. Whether it is to be received as firm, immutable, and accurate. So that he's just going on, when we define our terms, we have to know, is this a firm, immutable, and accurate definition, like mathematics, or as that which is merely probable and not indeed truth, but credible and assimilated to truth. So we're working like hypothetically in the modern sense in establishing our definitions. So he didn't really answer the question of what is the meaning of the words according to nature in an obvious way. Well, he says, no, he does. The principle, therefore, according to nature of the universe indeed, is the final cause, but of demonstrations. Okay. So the principle according to nature of the universe is the final cause, but the principle according to nature of our demonstrations is hypotheses, which deal with, later things in the chain of being. But in everything, to begin from a principle according to nature is the greatest of undertakings. So it's the greatest for the demiurge to begin from the final cause, and it's the greatest for us in building our knowledge, moving from potentiality to actuality in the states of soul of our knowledge. It's good to begin from those hypotheses. So that's good. That's just fine. And it's a very short section. Next, we'll try to get through it and then probably stop. After this manner, therefore, we must decide about the images and the paradigm of it. Okay. After this manner, beginning according to nature with first principles, we must decide about the image and the paradigm of it. These three particulars are co-nascently consequent to each other: the things, the conceptions, and the words. According to the things and the conceptions, therefore, Plato assumes the first hypothesis, but according to the words, he makes this definition. For when he separates that which is generated from being, he adheres to the theory of the things. But when he defines our knowledge according to the objects of it, he adheres to the theory of the conceptions. And now, distributing the words according to the diversity in the knowledge of them, let me read that again. And now, distributing the words according to the diversity in the knowledge of them, he demonstrates to us their definite nature of the words. Hence, these are consentaneous to each other, viz., twofold things, being and that which is generated, twofold knowledges, intelligence and opinion, and twofold words, the stable and the probable. Right. Okay. So he kind of anticipated that this would come up. Our definitions of our discussions certain or probable, and that corresponds to the twofold nature of being, the twofold nature of knowledge, and then here's the twofold nature of definitions. For whence are knowledges derived, except from the objects of knowledge, and whence is the difference of words derived, except from knowledges? So the same division should carry through between things, conceptions, and words. Some therefore say that it is the logographic art to define previously what the mode is of the diction, and what kind of person the auditor of it ought to be, and that Aristotle emulated this, and also many others more recent. Okay, and so so Aristotle had a token theory of semantics and on interpretation, where words mean what they are established to mean. Uh, Simplicius would have some kind of conciliatory interpretation here, I'm sure, or Ammonius, who has the commentary on interpretation. But and I kind of vaguely remember it. But for Proclus's purposes here, Aristotle is wrong in only getting the one division of the meaning of words, the probable and conventional, whereas actually both apply, and this is consistent with what Proclus says in his Critias commentary. So words are both by nature and by convention. That's the topic of the Critias. Well, the Scopos topic of the Critias is actually something about the demiurge for some reason. But the at face value, like what the text of the dialogue is about, is how words have their meaning. Okay. So I, however, should say that the discussion imitates the fabrication itself of things. For as that unfolds into light the invisible lives of the world, but gives subsistence to that which is apparent, and imparts a boundary to it prior to the whole world, thus also Timaeus adheres indeed to the theory of the things, but also makes the form of the words to be adapted to the things, and antecedently assumes and previously defines the mode of the whole theory of the discussion, in order that he may dispose the whole of the doctrine conformably to this definition. Why, therefore, does he do this now, and not before? Because, after the demonstration, it is requisite the word should be generated. He necessarily defines what the nature of the discussion about sensible things ought to be, but not prior to this, the nature of the universe being unknown. Because after the demonstration that it is requisite the world should be generated, he necessarily defines what the nature of the discussion about sensible things ought to be, but not prior to this. So before we can define our terms even, we have to know what we're talking about. So the things first, and then conceptions, and then words finally, actually. Because he's emulating, he says, because he's emulating the fabrication itself of things. The discussion imitates the fabrication itself of things. So that seems almost to run counter to what was said about principles, where with us we begin with terms in a discussion, but the way that Timaeus is giving this disquisition is in imitation of the fabrication of things on the part of the demiurge, and so words come last. But when he calls the world an image of such a kind is not to be assumed, as we conceive that of inanimate natures to be, as neither is the as neither is the paradigm unprolific and inefficacious, but an assimilation must be given to this world to the intelligible. So when we call the world an image, it's not like a flat, dead image. In the first place, indeed, according to the prolific power of the paradigm, for by its very being it produces the image from itself. In the second place, according to the demiurgic cause, which renders the universe most similar to the intelligible, by the energies extended to it. And in the third place, according to the conversion of the world itself to the forming power and participation of intelligibles. So it's an image in the sense that it receives the power of the paradigm, in the second, in the sense that it receives the demiurgic cause, which is intermediary, and in third place, in that it converts towards its paradigm in the way that an image is converted towards its paradigm and receives forming power and participation from intelligibles. For it assimilates itself, as the oracle says, hastening to be invested with the impression of the images which the intelligible gods extend to it. The world assimilates itself, hastening to be invested with the impressions of the images which the intelligible gods extend to it. So that's in that third respect in which the world is an image. It's an image because it's produced by a paradigm. It's an image because it's produced by the demiurgic work, which joins paradigm to image. And it's a paradigm, or sorry, and it's an image because as an image, it converts itself to its proper paradigm. So we'll go ahead and come back. The next lemma, as words therefore are allied to the things themselves of which they are the interpreters. And so now I'm sure we'll continue on this same general notion. Interesting, good stuff. We'll be back at this possibly not next week, actually, because we're having an event here in Arkansas that'll last the whole week. So I think Saturday might be the last day of the event, so I might have to cancel groups, but we'll keep you updated, at least in the reading groups, not on YouTube. That'll just be, you'll see the stream or you won't see the stream. But any last thoughts on the reading today?
No.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.